The whispers swept through the pews like prairie wind as Violet Rowe stepped into the church, clutching her worn Bible to her chest. San Antonio, Texas, in 1875 wasn't kind to women with secrets, and hers had somehow become the Sunday sermon without a single word from the pastor. She kept her head high despite the burning in her cheeks, despite knowing what they were all saying about the child growing inside her and the husband 6 months in his grave. Shameful, Mrs. Porter whispered loudly enough to ensure Violet heard. No decent woman would show her face. Violet's steps faltered, but she continued toward the front, her family's pew for 3 generations. No amount of gossip would drive her from her faith or her rightful place. She'd been coming to this church since before most of these people had arrived in San Antonio, and she wouldn't be chased away now. As she settled into the hard wooden bench, the empty space beside her felt cavernous. Then a shadow fell across her lap, and the scent of leather and sun-baked earth filled her senses. Yancy Walker lowered himself beside her, removing his hat in one fluid motion and placing it on his knee. His presence silenced the whispers momentarily, replaced by shocked gasps. Yancy Walker, the most eligible bachelor in 3 counties, foreman of the Circle K Ranch, sitting beside the pregnant widow in church. It was practically a declaration. "Morning, Mrs. Rowe," he said quietly, his voice carrying just enough for the nosy congregants in the next row to hear. "Beautiful day for worship." Violet stared straight ahead, her throat tight with unexpected emotion. "Mr. Walker," she managed, "you don't need to do this." His blue eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. "I know exactly what I need to do, madam." The organ began to play, saving her from having to respond, but the weight of his words settled over her. She hadn't spoken more than 10 words to Yancy Walker in her life, yet here he was, offering silent support when no one else would. Pastor Green took to the pulpit, his sermon focusing pointedly on forgiveness and judgment, his gaze occasionally drifting to Violet with something between concern and disappointment. When the collection plate came around, Yancy placed double his usual contribution, nodding respectfully to the pastor. As the service ended, Violet braced herself for the gauntlet of judgmental stares she would have to walk through. To her surprise, Yancy didn't immediately leave her side. Instead, he offered his arm. "May I escort you home, Mrs. Rowe?" The church fell silent, all eyes on them. Violet hesitated only a moment before placing her hand on his arm. "Thank you, Mr. Walker." They walked slowly down the aisle, past the whispers and stares, out into the bright Texas morning. Once they were clear of the churchyard, Violet released his arm. "While I appreciate your kindness, Mr. Walker, I don't need charity. Certainly not the kind that will have your name linked to mine in gossip." Yancy adjusted his hat against the sun. "With all due respect, Mrs. Rowe, I didn't do it for charity." "Then why?" she asked, genuinely puzzled. "You hardly know me." "I know enough," he said simply. "I know you've been running your late husband's mercantile alone for months. I know you work from dawn till dusk, and I know that bunch in there has no right to judge you." Violet's hand instinctively moved to her swelling middle. "They think they know things about this child." "It's not their business," Yancy said firmly. "And if it's all the same to you, I'd like to walk you home proper." She studied him, the earnest expression, the sun-weathered skin that spoke of long days in the saddle, the clear eyes that hadn't once looked at her with pity or contempt. "Very well, Mr. Walker, it's not far." They walked in comfortable silence through the dusty streets of San Antonio. Sunday was the one day the town seemed to pause, with businesses closed and families gathered for meals after church. Every window they passed seemed to hold watching eyes. "They'll talk about you now," Violet said as they approached the mercantile with the small apartment above it where she lived, keeping company with a fallen woman. Yancy chuckled, a warm sound that surprised her. "Mrs. Rowe, I've been talked about my whole life." "One more thing won't make much difference." At her door, he removed his hat again. "Would it be terribly forward of me to ask if I might call on you properly sometime?" Violet's eyes widened. "Mr. Walker, I'm a widow expecting a child," he finished for her. "I'm aware." "Then you must also be aware what people will assume if you come calling," he shrugged, unconcerned. "People always find something to assume. I'd rather give them something worthwhile to talk about." Despite herself, Violet felt a smile tug at her lips. You're a strange man, Yancy Walker. Is that a yes? She hesitated, then nodded once. You may call on Tuesday evening if you wish. I close the store at 6. Yancy placed his hat back on his head with a satisfied nod. Tuesday it is then. Good day, Mrs. Rowe. As she watched him walk away, Violet couldn't help but wonder what he truly wanted. Men like Yancy Walker didn't court pregnant widows without reason. Still, for the first time since her husband Thomas had died in that mining accident, she felt something other than dread when thinking about the future. When Tuesday arrived, Violet found herself watching the clock as closing time approached. She'd told herself not to expect much. Yancy had likely made the offer out of momentary pity or perhaps even a dare. Men did strange things sometimes, especially when a woman's reputation was involved. She was sweeping the floor when the bell above the door jingled at precisely 6 o'clock. Yancy Walker stood there, hat in hand, dressed in clothes clearly not meant for ranch work. His shirt was crisp, his boots polished. Evening, Mrs. Rowe, he said, looking somehow both confident and nervous. Hope I'm not too early. Violet leaned the broom against the counter. Right on time, actually. I was just finishing up. I brought these, he said, producing a small bundle of wildflowers from behind his back. Nothing fancy, but they caught my eye on the ride-in. The simple gesture touched her more than any grand bouquet could have. They're lovely. Let me put them in water. While she arranged the flowers in a jar, Yancy wandered the store, examining the merchandise with genuine interest. You keep a well-stocked place here. I try, she said. Thomas had good suppliers, and I've maintained those relationships. Can't be easy running this place alone. She turned to face him. Mr. Walker, are you here to assess my business acumen or to call on me socially? A smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. Socially, madam, though I admit I'm impressed by your business sense too. Then you should know I'm not looking for a new business partner or someone to rescue me, she said firmly. The mercantile is doing just fine. Never thought otherwise, he replied. Are you hungry? I thought maybe we could have supper at the hotel restaurant. Unless that's too public for your liking, Violet considered this. Dining at the hotel would certainly cause talk, but hiding away would only feed the rumors further. The hotel would be fine, Mr. Walker. Yancy, he corrected gently. If we're to have supper together, I think you might call me Yancy. Violet, then, she replied. The hotel restaurant was busy when they arrived, and the sudden hush that fell over the room when they entered was palpable. Yancy seemed oblivious, guiding Violet to a table by the window with a hand barely touching her elbow. After they were seated, conversation around them gradually resumed, though Violet could feel the stares. Yancy ordered for them both after consulting her preferences, and when the waiter had gone, he leaned forward slightly. Now, tell me something about yourself that has nothing to do with the store or recent events. Violet blinked, caught off guard. Like what? Anything? What do you enjoy? What makes you smile? No one had asked her such questions in a long time. I enjoy reading, poetry mostly, and I used to love riding before. She gestured vaguely at her condition. Poetry, huh? Any favorites? Wordsworth, she said, surprised by his interest. And some of Mr. Whitman's work, though I probably shouldn't admit that. Yancy grinned. Your secret's safe. I can't claim to know much poetry myself, but I appreciate someone who does. Throughout dinner, Yancy kept the conversation light and engaging. He told stories about his work at Circle K Ranch, about the characters he'd encountered in his years as a cowboy, and about his dreams of having his own spread someday. Not once did he mention her pregnancy, the whispers, or her late husband. By the time he walked her back to the mercantile, Violet realized she had laughed more that evening than she had in months. At her door, Yancy shifted his weight from one foot to another. I enjoyed this evening, Violet. So did I, she admitted. Though I still don't understand why you're doing this. Yancy's expression grew serious. When I saw you in church that day, walking tall despite everything, I admired your courage, and I figured anyone with that much strength deserved at least one ally in this town. Is that what you are? My ally, for starters, he said. I'd like to be your friend if you'll allow it. Anything beyond that is entirely up to you, and there's no rush to decide. His honesty was refreshing. I think I'd like that, Yancy, being friends. Good, he said, his smile returning. Then I'll call again if that's all right. It is. He tipped his hat and turned to go, then paused. For what it's worth, Violet, I don't give a damn what anyone in this town whispers about. The only opinion that matters to me is yours. As she watched him walk away, Violet felt something stir inside her that had nothing to do with the baby, something like hope. Over the following weeks, Yancy became a regular visitor at the Mercantile. He would arrive after closing, sometimes bringing small gifts, a book of poetry he'd found in a shop in the next town over, fresh berries from a bush he'd discovered while riding fence lines, a tiny wooden horse he'd whittled himself. For the little one, he'd said, handing her the carved toy. Every child needs something to imagine with. Sometimes they would eat together at the hotel, other times Violet would cook a simple meal in her apartment above the store. They would talk for hours about everything and nothing, their childhoods, their dreams, books they'd read, places they'd seen or hoped to see. The town's whispers didn't stop, but they changed tenor. Some speculated that Yancy was the father of her child, conducting a clandestine affair before Thomas's death. Others insisted he was simply a good Christian man taking pity on a fallen woman. A few kinder souls suggested he might genuinely care for her. Violet tried not to let the gossip affect her, but one evening in late July, as they sat on the small balcony behind her apartment watching the sunset, she couldn't hold back any longer. "Why don't you ask me?" she said suddenly. Yancy looked at her, puzzled. "Ask you what? About the baby?" "About what everyone is saying." He set down his coffee cup. "Because it's not my business unless you want it to be. But you must be curious, everyone else is." "Everyone else can go hang," he said simply. "Your past is yours, Violet. Your choices are yours. I'm here because I enjoy your company, not because I'm collecting information for the gossip mill." Tears pricked at her eyes, and she blamed it on her condition. "The baby is Thomas's," she said quietly. "Despite what they're saying," Yancy nodded. "I never thought otherwise. Thomas and I. We'd been trying for years. The doctor told us it might never happen." She placed a protective hand over her belly. "The mind collapse happened just 2 weeks after I realized I was expecting. He never even knew." Yancy reached across the small table between them and took her free hand. His palm was rough with calluses, but his touch was gentle. "I'm sorry he didn't get to know," he said. "That's a heavy thing to carry alone." The timing, she continued, needing him to understand. That's why they talk. Thomas had been working at the mine for nearly a month before the accident. He came home weekends when he could, but the math doesn't add up for the busybodies, Yancy finished. So they invented their own story. Violet nodded, wiping away a stray tear. "They decided I must have been unfaithful, that the baby belongs to someone else." "People see what they want to see," Yancy said. "Especially when the truth doesn't provide enough entertainment." She studied his face in the fading light. "And what do you see when you look at me, Yancy Walker?" His eyes held her steadily. "I see a woman of remarkable courage and grace. I see someone who faces each day with determination, despite carrying both grief and new life. I see someone I've grown to care for very deeply." His words hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. Violet felt her heart beating rapidly in her chest. "I care for you too," she admitted softly. "But my situation is complicated," he acknowledged. "I know that, and I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I just wanted you to know where I stand." The baby chose that moment to kick vigorously, making Violet gasp. Without thinking, she took Yancy's hand and placed it on her belly. His eyes widened as he felt the movement. "Strong," he said with wonder in his voice. "Like its father," Violet said automatically, then blushed as she realized how that might sound, but Yancy just smiled. "Thomas must have been quite a man to have won your heart." "He was," she said, grateful for his understanding. "But he's gone now, and I'm still here trying to figure out how to move forward, one day at a time," Yancy suggested. "And I'd be honored to walk alongside you for as many of those days as you'll allow." As August turned to September, Violet found herself looking forward to Yancy's visits with increasing eagerness. The Mercantile kept her busy during the day, but evenings with Yancy became the bright spot she anticipated. One Sunday morning, Violet entered the church to find Yancy already in her family's pew, waiting for her. It had become their custom now, but still she felt a warm glow at the sight of him. The whispers had diminished somewhat. Either the town was growing accustomed to seeing them together, or they'd simply found fresher gossip to occupy them. After the service, Pastor Green approached them in the churchyard. Mrs. Rowe, Mr. Walker, he greeted them, his expression difficult to read. Might I have a word? Violet tensed, but Yancy's hand at the small of her back steadied her. Of course, Pastor, Yancy replied pleasantly. The pastor cleared his throat. I wanted to inquire about your intentions. The two of you have been keeping company quite regularly, Violet bristled. I wasn't aware my personal matters were church business, Pastor. When they affect the moral standing of my congregation, they become my concern, Pastor Green said stiffly. There are impressionable young ladies who look to you, Mrs. Rowe, despite your situation. Before Violet could respond, Yancy stepped slightly forward. Pastor, with all due respect, Mrs. Rowe is a widow preparing for the arrival of her late husband's child. If spending time in her company somehow damages your congregation's moral standing, perhaps the problem lies not with her, but with those passing judgment. The pastor's face reddened. Mr. Walker, I'm simply concerned about appearances, Yancy interrupted, his voice still calm but carrying an edge now, are often deceiving. Christ himself taught us to look beyond them. Now, if you'll excuse us, I promise to escort Mrs. Rowe to dinner. He offered Violet his arm, which she took gratefully, leaving the flustered pastor behind them. You shouldn't have antagonized him, Violet said when they were out of earshot. I didn't say anything that wasn't true, Yancy replied. Besides, I'm getting tired of watching you bear the brunt of their self-righteousness. She squeezed his arm. I've grown used to it. You shouldn't have to, he said firmly. At the restaurant, they were seated at their usual table. Yancy seemed distracted throughout the meal, occasionally starting sentences only to trail off mid-thought. Is something troubling you? Violet finally asked. Yancy set down his fork. I've been offered a job, he said. A good one, foreman position on a ranch near Austin. Violet felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. I see, that's wonderful news. Is it? He asked, watching her face carefully. Of course, you've always spoken about wanting more responsibility. Austin isn't so very far. It's far enough, he said quietly. Too far to call on you of an evening. Violet stared down at her plate, fighting unexpected tears. When would you leave? I haven't accepted the position yet, he said. I wanted to discuss it with you first. She looked up, surprised. With me, but it's your decision, Yancy. Is it? He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Violet, these past months with you have been the happiest of my life. The thought of leaving you and the little one, it doesn't sit right. Her heart was pounding now. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you, he said simply. I think I have since that first Sunday in church, and I'm saying I don't want to leave, but I need to know if there's a reason for me to stay. Violet couldn't speak for a moment, overwhelmed by his declaration. Yancy, I am having another man's child. In less than a month, I'll be a mother. I know that, he said, and I would consider it an honor to help you raise that child, to be a father to him or her if you'd let me. You can't know what you're asking, she whispered. The responsibility, I know exactly what I'm asking, he interrupted gently. I'm asking if you might someday consider me as more than a friend. I'm asking if you could ever love me as I love you. The truth rushed to her lips before she could stop it. I already do. His face lit up with such joy that Violet couldn't help but smile through her tears. Then I have another question, he said. But not here, not now. Will you walk with me by the river this evening? There's something I'd like to show you. Curious and emotionally overwhelmed, Violet agreed. That evening, Yancy led her along the riverbank to a small clearing shaded by cottonwood trees. In the center of the clearing stood a partially constructed cabin. What is this? Violet asked, taking in the solid foundation and half-built walls. I bought this land 3 months ago, Yancy explained, suddenly looking nervous. After our first dinner together, I've been working on it in my spare time. Violet stared at him in disbelief. You've been building a house. I was hoping it might be a home, he corrected. For us. You, me, and the baby, if you'll have me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold ring. Violet Rowe, I know this isn't conventional. I know the timing might seem rushed to some, but I love you with all my heart, and I want to spend my life with you and your child. Will you marry me? Violet looked from the ring to the half-built cabin to Yancy's earnest face. This wasn't at all how she had imagined her life unfolding when Thomas died. She had expected years of loneliness, of struggle, of raising her child amid whispers and judgment. Instead, this good man was offering her partnership, protection, and love. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and sure. "Yes, Yancy, I will marry you." His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he pulled her gently into his arms and kissed her, a tender, reverent kiss that promised a lifetime of care. When they parted, Violet rested her head against his chest. "When?" "As soon as you'd like," he said, "though I reckon we might want to finish the roof on our house first." She laughed. "And there's a small matter of a baby arriving first." Yancy placed a protective hand over her belly. "All the more reason to make things official soon. I want this little one to have my name from the start, if that's all right with you." The thought of her child being born a Walker rather than a Rowe brought unexpected tears to Violet's eyes. "You would do that, Violet," he said seriously. "This baby is part of you, which means I already love it. I want to be a father to your child in every way that matters." She kissed him again, pouring all her gratitude and love into the gesture. They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at the Justice of the Peace's office, with only a few friends in attendance. Pastor Green had refused to perform the ceremony, claiming it was too hasty and inappropriate given Violet's condition. Yancy had simply shrugged and found another way. They moved into the newly completed cabin the very next day, though much of the interior was still unfinished. Yancy had insisted on carrying her over the threshold despite her protests about her size. "You're my wife now," he'd said with that smile that made her heart flutter, "and I intend to do this proper." Life settled into a new rhythm. Violet continued to run the mercantile while Yancy worked at the Circle K, turning down the Austin job with no regrets. In the evenings, they would work together on their home, making it ready for the baby's arrival. The whispers in town shifted again. Some still clucked their tongues at the hasty marriage, but others began to see the genuine love between them. A few of the women who had been coldest to Violet even stopped by the store with small gifts for the baby, a peace offering of sorts. On a crisp October morning, just as dawn was breaking, Violet woke to sharp pains across her abdomen. "Yancy," she gasped, clutching his arm. "It's time." The next 12 hours were a blur of pain and waiting. The midwife arrived promptly, shooing Yancy outside where he paced anxiously, wearing a path in the dirt around their cabin. Inside, Violet fought through contraction after contraction, drawing on a strength she hadn't known she possessed. As the sun was setting, a new cry filled the small cabin, strong and indignant. The midwife cleaned the squalling infant and placed the bundle in Violet's exhausted arms. "A healthy boy," she announced, "with a fine set of lungs." Tears streamed down Violet's face as she gazed at her son. He had Thomas's nose and chin, but her eyes already alert and curious, studying her face. "Yancy," she called weakly, "come meet your son." He burst through the door, his face a mixture of fear and hope. When he saw Violet holding the baby, his expression softened to one of pure awe. "He's perfect," Yancy whispered, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. He reached out one finger, which the baby promptly grabbed. "Strong, too." "Like his father's," Violet said meaningfully. "Both of them." Yancy's eyes filled with tears. "Have you thought of a name?" Violet nodded. "I'd like to call him Thomas Yancy Walker, to honor both the men who gave him life, one in body, one in heart." Yancy brushed a kiss across her forehead, then one on the baby's downy head. "Thomas Yancy Walker," he repeated. "It's a fine name for a fine boy." The following Sunday, they brought little Thomas to church for the first time. As they walked down the aisle together, Yancy, Violet, and the baby, the whispers started again. But this time, Violet didn't care. She held her head high, secure in the love of her husband and the joy of her son. To her surprise, Pastor Green approached them after the service. "Mrs. Walker," he said, using her new name for the first time. "Mr. Walker. Might I see the child?" Warily, Violet tilted the bundle in her arms so the pastor could see the sleeping infant's face. Something in the pastor's expression softened. "He's a fine-looking boy. Would you permit me to bless him?" Violet glanced at Yancy, who nodded slightly. "We would appreciate that, Pastor," she said. Right there in the churchyard, Pastor Green placed a gentle hand on Thomas's head and offered a blessing for his health and future. When he finished, he looked at Violet with genuine regret in his eyes. "I may have been too harsh in my judgment, Mrs. Walker. Forgiveness and understanding should be the cornerstones of our faith. I hope you can forgive an old man's misplaced righteousness." "We all make mistakes, Pastor," Violet replied. "What matters is recognizing them and moving forward." As they walked home, Yancy squeezed her hand. "You're a remarkable woman, Violet Walker." "How so? You just forgave the man who led this town in shunning you without a second thought." She smiled down at her sleeping son. "Life's too short for holding grudges. Besides, I have everything I need right here." The months passed, and young Thomas grew stronger and more curious every day. Yancy proved to be a natural father, endlessly patient and utterly devoted. He would spend hours playing with the boy, telling him stories about horses and cattle drives, teaching him the names of stars and trees. By Thomas's first birthday, no one in town remembered, or at least no one mentioned the old whispers about his parentage. He was simply the Walker boy, a cheerful toddler with his mother's laugh and his father's steady gaze. Violet continued to run the mercantile, now with Thomas playing in a small corner she had set up for him. Customers who had once avoided her store now stopped by regularly, often bringing treats for the boy or staying to chat with Violet. Yancy had been promoted to head foreman at the Circle K, which meant better pay but longer hours. Still, he made it home every evening in time for supper, eager to see his family. On a warm evening in late spring, as they sat on the porch of their now completed home watching Thomas toddle around the yard chasing fireflies, Yancy took Violet's hand. "Are you happy?" he asked. Violet leaned her head against his shoulder. "Completely, are you?" "More than I ever thought possible," he said. "Though I've been thinking." "About what?" "About Thomas having a brother or sister someday. What do you think?" Violet smiled. "Funny you should mention that. I've been meaning to tell you something." Yancy pulled back to look at her, his eyes widening. "Violet, are you?" She nodded, placing his hand over her still flat stomach. "The doctor confirmed it yesterday. Around Christmas, he thinks." Yancy whooped with joy, lifting her from the porch swing and spinning her around. Thomas, startled by the noise, came running to see what the excitement was about. Yancy scooped him up too, holding his family close. "What do you think, little man?" he asked Thomas. "Would you like a baby brother or sister?" Thomas clapped his hands, though he clearly didn't understand the question. Later that night, after Thomas was asleep, Violet and Yancy lay in bed talking quietly about the future. "Did you ever imagine we'd end up here?" Violet asked. "That day in church when you sat beside me." Yancy brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I hoped," he admitted. "From the moment I saw you walking down that aisle with your head held high, I knew you were someone special, even with all the whispers, especially because of them," he said. "The way you faced them showed me your character, and I thank God every day that I had the courage to sit in that front pew." Violet kissed him softly. "So do I, my love, so do I." In December, just as the first snow was falling on San Antonio, Violet gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth Rose Walker. Thomas, now a sturdy 2-year-old, was fascinated by his tiny sister, constantly wanting to touch her fingers and pat her head. As the years passed, their family grew and flourished. Yancy eventually saved enough to buy his own small ranch outside of town, where they raised horses and cattle alongside their children. Violet kept the mercantile, turning it over to a manager when she needed time with the children, but never fully stepping away from the business she had fought so hard to maintain. The whispers of that long-ago Sunday faded completely, replaced by stories of the Walker family's generosity and hard work. When newcomers arrived in San Antonio, no one thought to tell them about the scandal that had once surrounded Violet Rowe. Instead, they spoke of how Yancy and Violet Walker had one of the strongest marriages in the county, of how they had built something beautiful from difficult beginnings. On their 20th anniversary, Yancy surprised Violet with a small party at their ranch. Friends and family gathered to celebrate, including 17-year-old Thomas, who had grown into a thoughtful young man with his mother's business sense and his father's love of the land. During the celebration, Thomas approached Violet and Yancy as they stood arm in arm watching the festivities. "I have something I want to ask you both," he said, unusually serious. "What is it, son?" Yancy asked. Thomas took a deep breath. "I know the truth about my birth father, that he died before I was born, that you married mother when she was already expecting me." Violet tensed. They had never hidden the truth from Thomas, explaining it in age-appropriate ways as he grew, but they had never discussed it openly in public. "Who told you?" she asked quietly. "No one had to tell me," Thomas said with a small smile. "I've always known. And I wanted you both to know that I'm proud to be Thomas Walker. You," he said, looking at Yancy, "have been my father in every way that matters. I couldn't have asked for better parents." Yancy's eyes glistened as he pulled Thomas into a tight embrace. "You're my son," he said firmly. "From the first moment I held you." Thomas hugged him back, then turned to embrace Violet as well. "I just wanted you to know that those old whispers, the ones people think I don't know about, they don't matter to me. What matters is this family we've built." As Thomas rejoined the party, Yancy slipped his arm around Violet's waist. "We did good, didn't we?" he said softly. Violet watched their children laughing together, saw the home and life they had created from what had once seemed like ruins, and nodded. "We did," she agreed. "And it all started because you were brave enough to sit beside me in the front row of church when everyone else was whispering." Yancy kissed her temple. "Best decision I ever made." And as the celebration continued around them, Violet thought about how life could change in unexpected ways, how judgment could transform into acceptance, how whispers could fade to silence, and how love, when given freely and without condition, could build something stronger than any storm of gossip could tear down. In the years that followed, Violet often thought back to that Sunday morning when she had walked into church alone, pregnant and ashamed, facing the judgment of an entire town. How terrified she had been, how uncertain of her future. She could never have imagined then the life that awaited her, the love, the family, the respect she would eventually earn, all because one good man had chosen to sit beside her in the front row.